Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Mrs. Gallagher, and today we're going to learn how to find the hypotenuse using the Pythagorean Theorem. So there's some key vocabulary we need to know. The first key term is hypotenuse. And the hypotenuse is the side across from the right angle. It will be the longest side. So the hypotenuse is always the longest side. So if you look below, we want to find the right angle. So our right angle is right here. And the hypotenuse is the side across from the right angle. So the side across the right angle. This is your hypotenuse. And it's always the longest side. So now let's look at our next key vocab word, and it's leg. And legs are the sides adjacent to the right angle. So the legs are the sides adjacent to the right angle. Adjacent means next to. So it's next to the right angle. So again, if we look below, where are we next to the right angle? Again, here's your right angle, and our legs are next to it. Here's leg 1, and here's leg 2. So now if we move over to the triangle to the right side, you notice we labeled our sides A, B, and C. And what Pythagorean Theorem states, and this is a very important theorem that you need to know throughout the year, is A squared plus B squared equals C squared. Another way you can interpret this is this theorem is stating that one leg squared plus one leg squared, which is the other leg, is going to equal the hypotenuse squared. This is a key formula you need to know. So A squared plus B squared equals C squared, and that means the leg squared plus the other leg squared equals the hypotenuse squared. So again, in words, in any right triangle, and the Pythagorean theorem only applies to right triangles, the sum of the square of the lengths of the legs, so you're adding leg 1 squared plus leg 2 squared, is equal to the square of the length of the hypotenuse. So now let's do some examples together. So let's look at our directions. You're going to find the missing hypotenuse. Okay, so what we're going to do here is you always want to identify where your right angle is. Your right angle is right here. And your hypotenuse is the side across from the right angle. So that is your hypotenuse. And the hypotenuse is your C. So the other two sides are the adjacent sides to the right angle, and those are your legs that are going to be labeled as A and B. So our next step, we always want to write our formula down, which is A squared plus B squared equals C squared. And we know that A is equal to 3, so we have 3 squared, plus B is equal to 4, and that equals C squared. 3 squared, 3 times 3 is 9, plus 4 squared, 4 times 4 is 16, and that's going to give you C squared. Our next step is to add 9 plus 16, and 9 plus 16 equals 25, and that equals C squared. Now lastly, we know 25 equals C squared, but you want to find C. So the opposite of a square is taking the square root of each side. So now the square root of 25 is 5, and the square root of C squared is C, because C times C equals C squared. So your answer is going to be 5 equals C. So let's do another example together. Again, we want to identify our right angle, which is right here. And across is your hypotenuse, which is C. So now we can label the other two sides A and B. Notice I labeled differently as 1. If you look, I labeled B right here, and here I labeled A. Then I have A here and B here. The point I'm trying to make is it doesn't matter how you label your legs. A and B can be traded off. They can be switched. All right, so let's find out what C equals. First step, write your formula. A squared plus B squared is C squared. We know that A is equal to 8. I'm going to square that. Plus B squared is 6, and that equals C squared. 8 squared, 8 times 8 is 64. Plus B squared, 6 times 6 is 36. And then equals C squared. 64 plus 36 is going to give us 100. And that equals C squared. And again, you want to find C, not C squared. So you're going to square root each side to find out what C equals. So the square root of 100 is 10, and 10 equals C. So before we move on, I just want to stress that both 1 and 2 are special triangles. So in both examples, in 1 and 2, they're both special triangles. And they're special because they involve a Pythagorean triple. The Pythagorean triple in number 1 is 3, 4, and 5. And the Pythagorean triple in number 2 is 6, 8, and 10. So these sets are sets that you should know and make it much easier for you to answer these type of problems. And once again, 3, 4, and 5, and 6, 8, and 10 are known as Pythagorean triples. And we will discuss more about Pythagorean triples in class. So we're going to do 2 more examples together. So let's look at number 3. In the direction state, find the length of the hypotenuse around the answer to the nearest tenth. So what you always want to do is you got a right angle. If you look at your right angle is right here. And we're going to write our formula. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. So your next step is to identify your legs and your hypotenuse. Well, your hypotenuse is always across from the right angle. Therefore, we know that 5 is A and 9 is B. And you can also say that 9 is A and 5 is B. It doesn't matter. So let's plug in our numbers. So we have 5 squared for our A, plus our B is 9 squared, and that equals C squared. 5 squared is 25, 9 squared is 81, and that equals C squared. Our next step is to add those two numbers together. So 25 plus 81 gives us 106, and that equals C squared. And our last step is to find out what C equals. So we're going to square root each side. Now you're going to do the square root of 106 in your calculator, and you're going to round to your nearest tenth. That's 1 decimal. So your final answer is C equals 10.3. And that is your final answer. Let's look at one more. It says, find the length of the hypotenuse, round to the nearest tenth if necessary. Again, we have a right angle. And your hypotenuse is always across from the right angle. Therefore, your A and B is 2 and the square root of 8. So let's write our formula down. A squared plus B squared is C squared. My A is 2 squared. And my B is, I'm going to put in parentheses, the square root of 8 squared. And that equals C squared. All right, so next is 2 squared. 2 squared equals 4 plus, now we have a square root of 8 squared. And I'm going to redirect this right over here. So whenever you have a square root times a square root of the same number, all it does is eliminate the square root sign. So square root of 8 times square root of 8 equals 8. That's your answer. So the radicals cancel out. Okay, so your radicals basically cancel out whenever you multiply the same square root by itself. So that's going to give us 8 equals c squared. Then we have 4 plus 8. 4 plus 8 gives us 12 equals c squared. And our last step, we want to square root each side. And after we square root each side, you're going to get c equals approximately 3.46. And remember, the directions are stating to the nearest tenth. So a tenth is your first decimal. You're going to look behind it. It's a 6, so we're going to round it up. So your answer is going to be c equals 3.5. So what I would like you to do now on your own is the you-try section. I would like you to do the following. Numbers 1, 2, and 3, and we're going to discuss it in class. Thank you.